warm greetings. I extend my warmest welcome to the talk show Education 4.0 for Safe, Sustainable Societies.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the talk show organized by Samurja Educational Society on the theme Education 4.0 for Safe, Sustainable Societies. Starting from its inception in the year 1991, Samurja Society has engaged in supporting schools through various educational activities like organizing orientation programs, workshops, seminars, conferences, symposium, publishing periodicals and magazines for students and teachers, besides conducting social outreach programs like Girl Next Door and the Charity Wall. We explored new domains, trends, and vistas for our endeavors. We are grateful to Almighty for His blessings, and also we express our gratitude to all those who have supported us in past 30 years. Dr. Hasija and Dr. Pandey, they are the blessings to Samurja. They are the mentor and actually the trailblazers in motivating this thought of series of talk shows, Education 4.0. The learning from this global crisis pandemic is that it challenged us to restructure our endeavor. And the society introduced the online sessions to share, discuss, deliberate on the issues from the perspective of students, teachers, parents, and school leaders. In this second cohort of talk show, we are trying to understand the challenges faced in schools, mainly by educators in different domains. In every episode, we invite the expert to deliberate and guide us. The topic for today is future-proofing schools. The discourse on education in India is not new. Whether we talk about education imparted by Guru Dronacharya or Guru Vishwamitra, education received by Arjun, Karan, Eklavya, or Yudhishthir, educational ecosystem of Takshila or Nalanda, pedagogical structure or philosophy of Tagore or Gandhi. There are multiple versions of education for future. Some are assumptions, some are hopes, and others are expectations. Education is the passport for future. It is the investment for future. It is the foundation for future. It is the ladder of opportunity for futures. Swami Vivekananda has said, education is the manifestation of perfection already present in man. Time, situation, circumstances, economies, and societies change, and hence there is a need to redefine the mode of imparting education, not only within the school, but education as the preparation for safe, happy, and healthy life. At times, educational trends slow down. Sometimes they accelerate. Sometimes they bend, break, or melt. And sometimes unforeseen situation can disrupt even long-standing effective practices. As we are facing this time of COVID, the year 2020 and 2021 will always be remembered as the years of hindsight and foresight. It has reminded us that despite the best laid plans, the truth is that future likes to surprise us. And this is not the first time. 1720 plague, 1820 cholera, 1920 Spanish flu, and 2020 coronavirus. I'm not touching on the World War I and the World War II. During this COVID pandemic, schools and educators have evolved the challenging conditions. They have emerged as a true warriors. The need of today is to prepare our education system for what may be we have to consider not only the expected changes, but the changes which we have not thought in our wildest dream. Means preparing for adversities. IQ, EQ, SQ, and now AQ, adversity quotient, need to be the part of our pedagogy and the learning objectives. What kind of schools or pedagogy or learnings shall we have in future? Of course, there is no compromise with the quality of education with functional and inspirational learnings. And in the schools, as suggested in Bala project, talking walls, growth corridors, pillars, stairs, and a little more. Natural lights, view of greenery, optimum use of space, where labs, libraries, apparatus, technology, and furniture are not the add-on, but integrated in school infra without any silos. Besides, they are relocatable. I'm sharing the dream of a child, which I have read in one of the articles on the website OECD. The child says, I want a classroom where the roof opens to the sky like a BMW convertible so that I can see the clouds. Windows should have colorful glasses which glow in the sunshine and the cool breeze from outside entering in the classroom. Limitless supply of ice cream. Otherwise quiet, except the chirping of birds. And a classroom, if it can arrive in my area on the back of a truck, that will be cool. So that a child is expecting in future about his classroom. I'll stop myself here and now we'll listen to our expert. We have with us Mr. A.P. Sharma, Principal, Birla Public School, Qatar. Welcome, sir. And please extend a verbal greeting so that the participant they can see.
Thank you.
A.P. Sharma, sir.
Yeah, just allow me to share the screen.
Sir, just at the moment, we'll ask the question and then we'll start it.
Okay, sure.
Just extend a greeting.
Yeah. So
I'll also request Dr. Adnav Singh, Director, Nehru World School, to extend a verbal greeting so that our participants, they can have a glimpse of yours.
Thank you, Dr. Mukta Mishra. Thank you for inviting me here. And my disclaimer is that anything that I will say has only been learned from the people who are on the screen. I will only attempt to paraphrase and summarize what I've learned from them, but I will try to do my best. Thank you.
I request Monica ma'am to welcome our guest with a musical note. We also have with us our mentors, our guide, Dr. Pandey. I request Dr. Pandey to please extend a verbal greeting, and also Dr. Hasija. Dr. Pandey, please extend a
जी
verbal
नमस्ते
greeting.
नमस्ते वेलकम
नमस्कार.
डॉक्टर मिश्रा आज आपने बुलाया बहुत अच्छा लगा थैंक यू वेरी मच थैंक यू
I
Good
also
afternoon, everyone.
request Dr. Hasija to please
Good
extend.
afternoon, everyone. Ready to learn from another episode of Dr. Mukta's talk show. Thank you very much.
We also have with us Professor Harish Chaudhary. If the connection is being resumed, Professor Chaudhary, is he there?
Yes, I am very much here.
Welcome, sir. Welcome to the show. And waiting for your blessings and a lot of, the feedback from your end. You have always given me the feedback to evolve further. So welcome here. Without further delay, we'll start the talk show. Dr. Arnab, I hope you don't have to share any screen. Do you have to?
No.
All right. So let us start with the question. My first question is to you: how to make our schools future-proof, and what are the key areas which we must consider for making the schools future-proof? Over to Arnab.
Thank you, ma'am. While I would have liked to do a PhD under Dr. Harish Chaudhary's guidance on this topic of how do you future-proof schools, but I will attempt to give a short answer for this. When you were speaking, when you were introducing, you had talked about Dronacharya, and you had also talked about Eklavya. So in the same paragraph, you had talked about teacher-led classroom, and you had talked about the student-led classroom, or correspondence or remote learning. So, and this is happening 3000 BC, give or take 500 years. So as a country or a subcontinent, we've had exposure to various kinds of learning, and perhaps that has been the reason why a lot of learners from across the world would come to India to learn in Nalanda and Takshila, and these were places of learning for the longest time. And I would say this continued for a long time. And then the next big invention that happened to education was perhaps the printing press. In mid 1400s, when printing press came about, this would have been revolutionary, because in some ways the teacher was now able to extend the influence of the teacher and say, I teach in this classroom, but a condensed version of my thoughts are in this book, and you can travel far and wide, take this book thousands of kilometers, and then learn from it. And then other teachers could refer to that book. And for the next 400 years, apart from everything else that happened, but I would say that printing press would have been the big change. I'm remembering this from one of Dr. Ashok Pandey's keynotes, where he spoke about the printing press for a long time. But actually, it made sense to me. Yes, this would have allowed for schools to grow, and for people who have perhaps not traveled or not have been exposed to greater learning experiences, now had books written by philosophers that their students could learn. To my understanding, the next big turn that has happened is the invention of the internet, which came about in 1990 and perhaps were available in Indian schools in 2000. And at least as far as I am concerned, it is only this shift that I have seen as a student and also as the educator. And schools, I think, have been future-proofing themselves very well. Every time you throw a challenge at schools, they tend to emerge as winners across the world. And that is perhaps something to do with the DNA of a teacher. But I'll come to that in a very short while. So when the internet happens, now the spectrum of learning in the classroom is very different, because before that, the difference in the learning of the smartest child of the class and the child who doesn't know anything about what is being taught was one had read the book and the other had not read the book.
Okay.
And the teacher had read the book several times and had discussed that topic several times, and thus the teacher was entering the classroom with much more information. But comes the internet, and internet in smart devices. Now, if a child is excited about a topic, then the child is actually entering the classroom with much more information about that little subtopic in comparison to what the teacher has prepared for the lesson plan. I remember I walked into a primary classroom and these children were learning states of matter. I'm not a student of science, but I thought primary states of matter is something I should be able to ask a few questions on. So I asked these children, children, what are different states of matter? In my brain revising, there are 3 states of matter, liquid, solid, and gaseous. And this child says there are 4. And out of curiosity, I said, child, which is the 4th state of matter? He says, sir, there is solid, liquid, gas, but then there is also plasma.
Yes.
I'm like, hello. I think he's probably a fluke. So I asked him, can you tell me what is the plasma state? And then he goes on to say, well, heat up the matter and it goes to plasma state. But to be a teacher in that classroom, the teacher also has to be accepting of the fact that there is a child sitting in this classroom who knows more about this topic than I do, and I'm comfortable with it. So if schools have to future-proof themselves, then I think this would be probably my pillar number 1, our acceptance that we are not the sum total of all knowledge. And we are not here as the giver of that knowledge. We are here as in some ways, as a facilitator of that knowledge. And the child can know much more. Another thing that schools would need to do is to realize that this solution is not a permanent solution. And there is a very good example of that. When last March, we switched a button, went from offline only class to online only class. And in a month's time, stumbled our way through, taught each other, and presented ourselves in our digital avatars. This was teachers around the world in different schools very clearly saying, you throw a good challenge at us, and we are going to solve it. Maybe over the last 10 years, I have been saying this, that while computers would not replace, or technology will not replace teachers, but teachers who use technology effectively will replace those who don't. So I think this is something that has happened because teachers or schools who were not able to embrace technology or were not able to embrace this change found themselves being out of fashion or out of use pretty much overnight. They did not even take as much time as the dinosaurs took. So acceptance to this change would be another. And the third, people who genuinely need to accept this change would be the school promoters. I think this understanding that while the school building may be important, that infrastructure may be important to transact that learning, but a school really is the teacher and the student in that school. Without that, it is only a building. So those schools that invested in their teachers and their students and worked on developing thinking and problem solving, perhaps find themselves better off in comparison to those who didn't. So if you have to future-proof your schools, you would need to keep investing in the human capital that happens to be in that school every day. I personally feel that my school leaves the school building every day and comes back the next day. What is left there overnight is not a school. So to me, these would probably be the 3 pillars of how do you future-proof an organization.
Wonderful. I'm so very impressed. I'll talk about how, what pedagogies we should use or how we we should use by Sharma sir a little later. Arnab, actually you have answered another question of mine, rather from the participants which we have received. I just quoted Swami Vivekananda that it's the manifestation of perfection. Will the future be focused on students or teachers? You have already answered. Now, shall we provide the ecosystem to manifest that perfection? Focus on people, already answered. But still, once you are referring to the school building, I am including in school ecosystem a little more things, right? So in the times to come, do you feel it's only the students and the teachers, or the ecosystem is also necessary for those future schools, not referring to the building only?
It's a pertinent question, and especially now when you're talking about so many of these online providers that are existing, and questions are being asked that, are schools actually even necessary? If the child can learn, if a class like this can happen every day, and you can bring in the best of teachers from all around the world, then why do you really need the child to go into a school system? And the more marketing budget a company has, the more loudly they are asking this question to schools. But I personally feel that this entire ecosystem is not just a manifestation of knowledge transfer. It is a manifestation of being, of existing, of understanding yourself in correlation with others. So while this infrastructure is required, and if it is a good infrastructure which leads to learning, then even better. And on the other hand, harnessing this technology also is quite important. But to me, the key masala or the formula that Coca-Cola keeps to itself, only apparently some 2 people in the world currently know exactly what it is the ethos that you develop in that ecosystem. You need to keep the building clean, keep it safe, all of that. But what is that ethos that you're developing in that ecosystem? To my understanding, is the key to that formula. Let's just take this last year. Those children who had been exposed to these really personal relationships with their teachers and with their friends were able to cope much better in that same classroom in an online environment, because that strong bond had already developed. But those children who've been added to these classrooms and have only seen these Zoom tiles for their teachers will perhaps be finding it much more difficult to become a part of that ecosystem. With my daughter, I went to the Republic Day function of her school. The school had said, whoever wants to come can come. So some children and excited parents showed up. So we were there. So there was this child who saw his teacher for the first time, who he'd been learning from, for about a year. So the child sees the teacher. The child runs to the teacher and touches her. He touched the teacher to feel that this is a real human. So to me, that forms the ecosystem. I don't see the only online format as a sustainable format, and leaving everything outside. The parent can only work when the child is in our care for 6 to 7 hours a day. So we are not just doing the transaction of learning there. We are also making sure that the child is safe in this time. So that's my understanding of the ecosystem that we are operating in.
Thank you so much. You answered my next question in your answer. So I'll come back to you later. I'll ask.
I'm telling you, I don't have that paper that you're reading from. This is not like the last year.
Good. So AP Sharma sir, we have listened to you at so many platforms about the pedagogy. We have listened to you on this platform of Samurja about developing skills. Now, what kind of pedagogical structure, skills will be required for the future schools? Sir has to use the PPT. Monica, sir, please make the co-host, sir. Over to AP Sharma, sir.
Thank you, Mukta ma'am. So my greetings to all the listeners, because that time I missed, and especially Professor Harish after many, many years. I hope he will recognize me. I was from APJ Sheikh Sarai, and Dr. Pandey, Kriti ji, and Dr. Arunab. It's very nice to be here, Hasija ji. So basically, I have made just 2-3 slides so that I can present it beautifully, because sometimes you need to click the photograph in something. But before that, I would like to say that in 2019, the same kind of talk show was going on, and then people were telling that what kind of skills, and you can predict the 2025 and 2030. Believe me, not a single person told that there will be Zoom, there will be Microsoft, and all these things. So this means, first of all, you can't predict everything what is going to happen in 2025 and 2030. Only thing, there are some basic principles which we have to follow, and these are related to smart work. These are related to update our knowledge and update our skills. Now, there was one very interesting question people asked, that whether the education should be teacher-led or student-led. I think the answer is neither the teacher-led nor the student-led, depending upon circumstances. So in the classroom, it is circumstances-led. Who will monitor or who will be on the driver's seat depends on the circumstances. So we should not stick to one particular point. Sometimes it is required for a teacher, sometimes it is required for a student to monitor and just move around. So just I will share my screen. So this we have already discussed, that basically education 4.0 paradigm shift, internet revolution, but students are still taught in education 2.0. This is a very big question, that children are moving to education 2.4. Now teachers need to move from education 2.0 to 4.0, as well as parents. This is a big question for everyone to think about. Now, what is the perception, like how we and things are moving? Basically, the physiological needs and functions, that was basic things, low level of needs. And yeah, the physiological hygiene, survival, these were the things in 1.0. Then 2.0, safety needs, safety, convenience, ownership. Social needs then started, communication, social participation, social networking, esteem needs. That is very important, where we need aesthetic needs and cognitive needs, self-expression, status consciousness. That is happening right now. And from here, where we can move, like a circle, the life goes is a self-actualization, actualization of others. This means moving somewhere to the self-actualization needs, where we are a global citizen. Now the boundaries are falling. Now you can see I'm talking from Doha, and you could have had anybody from Singapore or United States, and all, many such kind of conferences are there. So these things are breaking. Now it's very important that we need to find out our skills, our actualization, and then need to work on that. Now, I made it like the pedagogical challenges by 2025 and 30. We will find that it will be digitally inclined curriculum. Very interestingly, digitally inclined curriculum means NCERT will have to make a curriculum. If NCERT will not make, then educationists need to make a curriculum in which there are certain things which are digitally inclined, and with vocational urgently, because now it is required, and as soft skills, social responsibility and curricular global environment awareness and action, engaged thinker, collaboration, problem solving, creativity, and design thinking. It will continue. I have added design thinking here. New subjects and core 2030. We were having a discussion, internationally forum discussion, where we come to know that there may be the new subjects which will come. Maybe that the history will be diluted. Maybe the moral teaching will come up. Maybe some value-based and soft skill-based subjects will come up. active inter and transdisciplinary methodologies, and biomimicry design. This is one keyword I have picked up for the future pedagogy. Here, biomimicry design is that education as well as architect, as well as whatever plant and inventions will be coming. Most of the governments have decided, most of the big countries have decided that these should be biomimicry design. What does it mean? Means the concept that leads to helping environment or imitating environment. So inside the classroom, outside the classroom, wherever the ecosystem is going on, there should be a biomimicry design in which we define biolize. This will be very important step. Biolize means if we are teaching one particular subject to the child, people will get to know what is the impact on the child, psychological impact on the child, that is his body. What will be the impact on society? What is he learning about the environment? So biolize will be very interesting term, which I am using over here. Discover, abstract, emulate, and evaluate. These are the old things which are already there. Flexible curriculum. Now we are talking about NEP 2020. Now NEP 2020 will become obsolete every 1 year. There will be a process, but there will be a flexibility in the curriculum, because things will change every year. And if we are thinking that we will be bearing the fruits of NEP 2020 in 2035, it will be too late. Government has to decide that again, the new NEP, there should be revision of NEP after 2 years, 3 years, like that. It will be required. Even Dr. Kasturi Ranjan has said it very clearly that it is not final. It is flexible system where the things will improve. And then ethical citizenry, entrepreneurial spirit with scaffolding, lifelong learning, self-direction, and personal management for both teachers and students. Mr. Anurag has already mentioned it very clearly. Teacher training and whole ecosystem is to be changed. The next slide is very simple. We are moving from digital natives. So I think everybody is aware about that. Now, the thing will be that in 2025 and 30, we will find people are living longer. By 2025, world population will increase by 50%. Workplace automation is killing repetitive jobs. This means we will be looking for different kind of jobs, and the pedagogy will be such kind of vocational trainings in which we need to look for such kind of skills which are futuristic skills. Data will give us the ability to see things. There will be diversity and adaptability is at the center of operations. Social technologies drive new forms of production and value creation, new communication tools. Right now, we are thinking about few things like internet and all. We don't know in 2 years what better technology will come, and we will be thinking about certain kind of things. These are 10 digital skills which Education 4.0 demands. Cognitive flexibility, very, very important. I'm starting from 10. Negotiations, which one is better? Service orientation, continuous orientation of service, the people who are working in that, like the teachers, as well as the students and parents also now. Judgment and decision making, emotional intelligence, a lot of people know about this. Coordinating with others, people management, creativity, critical thinking, and complex problem solving. Things will improve a little bit. And very, very interesting thing is that there may be some kind of changes which will come. The most important thing is that if we are thinking that spoon feeding will work, which was working for many, many years, then we are wrong. At the end of spoon feeding, child learn only the shape of a spoon, nothing else. So please remember, we have to give them some kind of a thought process in which they can think. Not only they can think, they can create, and we give them a kind of a boost or a kind of a catalyst on which they work. I give one example that I generally go to classes and throw some challenging question to children. Like I threw one question that, okay, if Earth stops rotating and revolving, what will happen? Work on this and come tomorrow. So children started thinking many things. Similarly, I asked them, try to prepare a ball which is bouncing and not stopping. What all are required? And students come with, today I was talking to one student, and he said, sir, I have done something very interesting, that I know everything about NASA and rockets and all. I was asking him various things and he was coming up great things. He said, sir, once you talked about NASA, so I thought. So giving them seed for thought is very important. And pedagogically, yes, it should be something in which we create interest of the child, and child start learning at home. coming prepared, and even parent is also participating in that and understanding that all things are gone. Ma'am, unmute.
Wonderful. So you have encompassed so many things in just 3-4 slides, and it's just brilliant. I mean, hats off to you, giving us a complete package. I was about to take the screenshots. 1 or 2 I have taken, but brilliant. Sir, in one of the platforms, you have mentioned about developing the things through our own culture, through our own comics, right? I really enjoyed, I really kept that point where you specifically mentioned that why we are teaching Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, right? So I request you to please share the things how. On one side, like just now you have said that maybe history will be diluted. I think you mentioned that those dates and the chronological order may not be that important, but I'll take one feedback from Harish sir also, because he also quite a couple of times shares with me, because I'm really scared of this history. But the history is teaching us. Please share some of the examples that retaining those ethos, values, culture, Indian values, how we can develop the skills. I'm just grabbing Humpty Dumpty's, you know.
Yes.
I really like that example of yours.
Yeah, ma'am, actually, I'm the member of NEP committee in one of the state, and there we were talking. And when I asked, there were 2 VCs also, and I asked her, do you know the origin of Humpty Dumpty and all, like Jack and Jill? And it was a surprise for them that all these having a historical relevance, nothing to do with India. So why don't we teach certain kind of poems which has some values, which has at least some meaning? Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, and Humpty Dumpty was actually a cannon. Similarly, Jack and Jill fetch, that whole thing is related to French Revolution. Nothing to do. Baba Black Sheep is related to the taxation system in the Europe, England particularly. Nothing to do with our Indian system. So prepare some kind of poems. We have amazing people, amazing teachers, amazing creators who can create poem where mitti ki khushbu aaye. And then the local culture will come. And basically history, I'm against history is being taught in class 5th, 6th and 7th, where child is not mature enough to take certain kind of decisions. And we are talking them that history which create some kind of, inferiority complex among children. I did discuss with children of 5, 6, 7. They said, sir, 98% children said, yes, sir, from history, we are understanding that we are inferior. We were ruled by Britishers. We were ruled by Mughals. We are not teaching at that level the ancient history, which is very good. And then sometimes when we talk about Mughal Empire and all, it creates some kind of, hatred among students. We did ask this question. Do you think sometimes, yes, it leads to? So we need to change the way of teaching history. I'm sure Dr. Arnab would be having a different context, but yes, there, when we discussed, we said, yes, history is to be taught in a different way. So at that age, children feel, yes, we belong to a great culture. We belong to a great history of the country, which has great things. By saying only that India had been the guru, and we never explained that India had been a guru in our textbooks, it becomes a little bit futile.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So very well taken, sir. Like we must use the Indian tales for teaching the skills. For example, teaching of, discussing or giving this as a reading, Tenali Rama for lateral thinking, Akbar and Birbal for analytical thinking, Vikram and Betal for critical thinking, and so on. So very well. My next question is to Dr. Arnab. Arnab sir, we have actually learned a lot from you with reference to collaboration, international collaboration, participation. Do you feel that we should continue with the collaboration and we should completely scrap the competitions? Dr.
Very good question. I will come to your answer, but I can't help myself but spend a couple of minutes on what was just being spoken. And I believe that before you read history, you read the historian who's written that history, and then you read history in the context of that filter. The same Indian independence would have a different historical reference to an Indian history book, to a Pakistani history book, and to a British history book. And how it would be ideal that rather than asking questions like, when did we get independence, we start asking our children, what really is independence? How do you keep it? What is the responsibility that comes with it? And I'm sure as our assessment systems are improving, we will come to these deeper questions. As a result, lead to children researching on many more things. But I'm a proponent of, yes, we should be talking history to our children. At least we should be talking historical questions to our children. Our children will surprise us with the kind of research that they can put together, even in the primary school. And let's not forget, that's where their brain is developing the most. On one hand, we say 0 to 6 is where they're developing most. On the other hand, we say, well, actually leave them alone and don't give them any developmentally appropriate stimuli. So these two schools of thought are so different. Coming back to your question on competition and collaboration, some of us might have heard of Gijubhai Badeka. Gujarati teacher, 1930s, writes this book called Divya Swapna. And in Divya Swapna, he's talking about collaborative learning experiences, project-based learning, and he's not claiming that I have figured all of this on my own. He gives reference to Maria Montessori's work and Froebel's work, and how he's used the learning from the best of the world to enrich the child in his own classroom. I am certainly of that school of thought. I would beg, borrow, steal from any system in the world if that gives my learner a better opportunity at his present and at his future. So these collaborative experiences have been talked about by our philosophers. That is another thing that we don't teach our own philosopher in our own book. I don't know if Gijubhai Badeka is even being taught in the Bachelors of Education programs in India. And if he's not, he should. And anybody who's listening to us today, if you've not read Divya Swapna, do it before you go to sleep. Thin book, PDFs available all across. Seems like Gijubhai Badeka's family has given up their rights on that content. So PDF of this book is available. Like, you search it, you'll get it. And all these modern terms that we feel happy about speaking, this man said in 1930s and worked on it, and so it's all there. Collaboration is a reality of a learner. You could not make the COVID vaccine just by research originating from one country or research originating from people of one country. But as much as collaboration is a reality, competition is also a reality.
So
you had to do it first.
What should be the percentage?
There is no percentage. There is no percentage. Perhaps as the student goes through more and more of emotional maturity, we can keep exposing children to more competition. And what is the age of that emotional maturity? I don't know that. I know some of my friends who are not emotionally mature at 40. I know some seniors who are not emotionally mature at 60 or 80. So no, there is no age in which class you start competition and till which class you do collaboration. But as a teacher, you need to be sensitive to the needs of your students.
Thank you, Arnab. Harish sir, just a quick bite from you. Why should we learn history?
Honestly, I don't know.
Sir, you have answered. Abhi to maine aapse ye question pucha.
And honestly,
actually, beautifully. I mean, I really want to know. You have beautifully answered it. And basically, you told me we were discussing on some book, and you,
yes.
Because of you, that I read that book, sir. So you please share once again.
No. And honestly, I don't know how accurate history is, because more often than not, it is a documentation from the state. And history gets distorted. I believe there's a lot of effort in rewriting Indian history over the last few years. Also, at the same time, if one could look back, does it give you a key to the future? But I would rather avoid this question and go to the more basic issue of what is the purpose of education? You have looked at various perspectives. I'm coming around to believing two purposes. One, to enable a child to live happily in balance with the nature and the environment. And two, to promote global peace. And if I look at the last 25 years or 30 years that I have been a teacher, I think we have all collectively and miserably failed on both the fronts. As I look at this panel here, and Arunabh and I spent some lovely time in April on the beaches of Goa. We had very animated discussions. I'm beginning to feel we, all the panelists here, and associated with the schools that we represent only one microcosm, one small group. And your question is brilliant. I will go to that previous question, competition and collaboration or cooperation. I think competition is very important. It's the basis of development. Collaboration is important. Competition, unfortunately, tends to become unhealthy if it is not coupled or synchronized with ethics. So can we bring in that? At the same time, coming to your question of why history should be taught, it needs to be understood and felt, not taught. And I think Arunabh said it in his opening remarks when he talked of future proof. We have to get away from teaching. We have to move to learning. And we have to move to understanding. We have to get away from subjects. We have to teach the children, not the subject.
Very, very right.
At the same time, I'm a little worried. At my age, probably it happens. Are we at all moving towards a better world, or are we creating greater divisions? The first major divide, maybe, in my understanding of history, in the Indian society came with English, the Macaulay system and the Macaulay papers. And Dharampal, in his famous book, talks about it. And again, with that same title, The Beautiful Tree, James Tooley talks about the same, as to how the world gets divided. Of course, one can go further back and say, no, it happened with the Industrial Revolution. But sans ethics, science becomes the biggest divider. And you refer to Swami Vivekananda, he writes, religion is the biggest unifier, religion is the biggest divider. It's a source of peace, it's a source of war. So I'm going back to that basics. What are we educating? Are we creating a bigger divide with the internet? And if I go by what I'm reading these days, children dropping out of school, children not able to access education. So we certainly have a responsibility towards the, if I may say, the upper middle class to which most of our schools cater. And of course, I remember Mr. Sharma from the APJ days, but I also had a 5-day workshop for teachers at Doha at Birla Public School a few years back. And I had an occasion to see those schools. We all represent a very narrow bandwidth. Mukta ma'am, 4:51, I'll just take 2-3 minutes more, if it's okay with you. So I had a delegation from Japan, eight of them, led by a university professor, some businessmen, some government officials. And they came to meet us and he asked me, how can we understand India? And I asked him, which India? India 1, India 2, India 3, India 4. Which India do you want to understand? Because if you want to understand India, sorry, lifetime is not enough. We are representing India 1 at best. And then I also commented that, look, we are a very divided society. I believe Japan is largely middle class. He got up, he got angry, he got upset. He says, no, Professor Chaudhary, we are 100% middle class. Finland, and Mukta ma'am, you have been to Finland a number of times. The difference between the lowest paid and the highest paid worker there is approximately 1:4. And the highest paid worker there is a heart surgeon, not a politician. I think the internet is creating a bigger divide and a bigger chasm across the world, which we definitely will not be able to see its end, but I think it's something which will not be able to undo. Technology has that. Technology has a dark side to it. There is the World Wide Web and there's the dark web. And when it will take over, we don't know. So once again, if you look at history, and history will give you these episodes where we went wrong. And can I take another 2 minutes? Do you want me to stop?
So we will, because this whole series, the talk show, will be about these things. So we can continue with this in the next episode,
Sure.
if it's okay.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So, Dr. Sija, if I can ask you a question, the parents of today's, they are expecting, that designer kind of schools, or with all the facilities. That's the first priority of a parent. On one side, when Arnab is saying that we must talk about students as well as teachers, out of these two, since you being a practitioner, Dr. Pandey being a practitioner, and again, Dr. Harish was talking India 1 and India 2, and I'm referring to one model of the school and the other model, and there are third model and the fourth model also. So what are the expectations of parents which one kind of school can satisfy out of different models, the schools or the students and the teachers, which will stay for long? The reason is, I have heard the parents, बच्चे को हम पढ़ा लेंगे, आप बस स्कूल में उसको कुछ मत कहिए, और फैसिलिटीज सभी स्कूल में होनी चाहिए. Over to you, sir.
I think the parents' expectations are related to the ethos of the school. A leader sets up the ethos, and accordingly the parents make their expectations. I am with Professor Harish Chaudhary when he said that we should teach the child, not subject. Often I have said there was a time when teacher was known by his disciple Arjun Guru Dronacharya. Today we are history teacher, mathematics teacher and science teacher. The child has lost fully into that. So I personally believe school building, infrastructure, design does not matter. It is the connect between the child and teacher matter. And I just take one more minute. Often we call, when Dr. Professor Harish Chaudhary said the purpose of education. Yes, read, write and arithmetic, the 3 R are very important. But I often say that these 3 R have a different connotation also. And that is relation. Relation to self, relation to society and relation to environment. If we have not trained our children for these 3 R's, believe it, the read, write and arithmetic have no meaning. So forget designer school, forget designer facilities, connect with the child and teach the child, rather inspire the child to learn. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Dr. Pandey, my last question is for you. Presently, what we feel, 3 main challenges, that is skill, scale and speed. How to manage that and in what proportion? Dr. Pandey.
Thank you, Dr. Mukta. Skill, scale, and proportion.
Speed.
I will tell you, when Arno started the 400, 500 years old history, I was getting worried, let me tell you. 400 years ago or 300 years ago, you learned, let us say, 10 skills, and you could survive for next 100 years. Okay. Today, if you have 10 skills set and its worth is, let us say, 100 to understand the mathematics better, in next 5 years, that worth will remain to 50. So half life of skills today is just 5 years. And in another 5 years, they will reduce to 25%. You get my point? So that is the speed. And therefore, a very pertinent question that we have to ask ourselves in the context of all that has been discussed beautifully, that a child who is entering the school today at the age of 3, and he or she will enter the workforce at the age of, let us say, 23 or 25. So what will be the skills required after 25 years from now? Do we have any clue about it when the half-life, as I said, is just 5 years? And therefore, what are we teaching? So you teach them subject, you teach them skills, you teach them values, you digitize them, you miniaturize the entire devices. What do you do? You see? So I think that is the basic question that we are. And then the future proofing, your main concept, then how do we future proof these children? That after 25 years, they will be able to navigate the world. You see, they will be able to connect with each other. They will be economically productive. And as Dr. Harish Chaudhary said, that they will be happy too. They will be at peace too. And they will be able to create a world which is peaceful, right? So that is the question that we have to ask. And for that, you know, the clues are there, which AP mentioned, the 10 skill set. McKinsey has done a very good research, and they have come out that the higher cognitive skills, socio-emotional skills, and digital skills, you know, they are the ones which are going to gain ground, right? The Forbes has come out with another set of skills, but if you just combine them, you will find that the socio-emotional skills, the higher cognitive skills, and of course, digital skills, you know, these are the 3 skills which will interplay with each other. And we have to use these skills for our own benefit, for society's benefit, and to make this society sustainable. Now, what will be the modality of it? What will be the nuance of it? That is something we can debate. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I'll request each of the participants to come up with one liner, just one liner for the future proofing schools. And I'll conclude here that when we talk about the scalability, after listening to all the experts, I was just attending one of the webinars of just friends. It was a informal kind of thing, where one of my friends who was taking the session shared that in my school, skills definitely one parameter, one domain. And she shared that we don't ask the children to prepare for engineering, medical, or any kind of profession. We tell the children to be prepared to be the Nobel laureate. So once we are referring to the skills and scale, I think we, irrespective, we need to modify our skill. We need to modify the things, but that scalability needs to be to explore something, to innovate something to the level of Nobel laureate. So I was really impressed. So over to AP Sharma sir, just one liner, sir.
One liner
Sharma,
is,
sir.
yeah. One liner is that instead of normative approach, we should go for deductive approach.
Very good. Ritina, you need to note down, instead of normative, it needs to be progressive.
Deductive.
Deductive approach. Why? Arnab sir.
Create love for learning.
Create and love for learning.
Create a love for learning. And if you've done that in your learners, then they're sorted for life.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Harish,
Flexibility.
repeat again, sir.
Flexibility.
Flexibility. Flexibility. Dr. Hasija,
Sir, unmute.
sir, unmute yourself.
Inspiration makes a whole change in any scenario. Let's inspire our children to the fullest.
Leadership makes a difference. Thank you. Dr. Pandey.
Dr. Harish has said only one word and you said one sentence. So his sentence and my sentence, let me say two sentences. And that is a proverb, a Buddhist proverb. And that says that every man and woman is given a key to the heaven. The problem is that the same key also works for the hell. So what does it mean is that we have to have, skills and knowledge and everything. But how do we use it so that we don't go to the hell is the value system. So this interrelationship between the value system, skills and knowledge is something that could be a hope for the future.
I think plethora of takeaways for us, for all the participants. Thank you, Dr. Sharma, for being on the show. It's really, really great. The time is very, very less, but we really wanted to, and you have really done justice, the way you have encapsulated so many things in such less time. Thank you, Arnav, for being on this show. Thank you, Dr. Harish, Dr. Hasija, and Dr. Pandey. Thank you so much for making this episode a success. Over to Kriti, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
As Swami Vivekanandaji rightly said, see for the highest, aim at the highest, and you shall reach the highest. On behalf of Samurja Educational Society, I am very hearty gratitude to all the speakers for sharing their graceful words with us in today's talk show. We have been fortunate to have renowned identities from academics. I must say, biomimicry, designing the concept which leads to helping environment. This is a very good takeaway for today. And also, we must take up Indian tales for teaching. And at the end, Sir formally said that instead of taking normative, it should be deductive. So the participants are full of some good value takeaway for today. I must thank a proficient sense of gratefulness to Mr. A.P. Sharma sir for sharing with us some of the finest skills. All the past participants of this talk show, including our team, all are inspired by your highly sparkling words. I want to extend my generous thanks to Mr. Arnab Singh, sir, who has a thought-provoking address. I'm sure that all the participants have taken note of 3 pillars of future-proof schooling and will be discussing within their organizations. Thank you, Dr. Harish Chaudhary, sir, for your presence, and your pointers always help us giving our best. I thank our leaders, Dr. Rajesh Hasija, sir, and Dr. Ashok Pandey, sir, for their leading supervision and inspiring us at every point. I am thankful to Dr. Mukta Mishra ma'am for her efforts and bringing so many educators in this platform. Monica ma'am for being one of the pillars of Samurja. Once again, thanks a lot everyone and namaskar.
Thank you.
Namaskar, everyone. Namaskar.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Muktaji. Congratulations once again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Another fabulous episode of Talk Show.
Thank you.
I'm sure Dr.